look at our resources and where we allocate those resources, they might be something different. For example, we often say that serving God is the most important thing in our lives. But when it comes to looking at our lives, is that really what's the most important thing? Is that really where we have our priorities? How much of our time, how much of our talents, how much of our treasures, how much of our other resources do we really allocate to God and to serving God? Well, tonight, I want us to continue to look at the Sermon on the Mount, at a part of it, and where Jesus addresses his priorities. And we can see what he says there about our priorities and what he says about where our treasures are. So we're going to read in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6. We're going to read verses 19 through 21. So follow with me. He says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasures are," where your treasure is, I should say, "there your heart will be also." So I want us to look at what it would take for these verses one by one and see what it takes to apply to our lives, what they mean for us as Christians. First of all, and this is probably going to be a little shorter study tonight, but don't hold me to that. Sometimes I get a little long-winded. Verse 19, let's begin with that. It says, "Do not lay up treasures for yourself. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal." Now, Jesus is speaking here, and he is telling us that we should not be putting our treasures here because of different factors. Why should we not lay up treasures on earth? What does this mean for us as Christians? Does it mean that we're not to save money? Does it mean that having wealth is sin? Well, the answer to both of those is no. Does it mean you're not to prepare for a rainy day or have something for a rainy day or keep something aside in case of an emergency? No, that's not what it means. Does it mean that having wealth is a sin? No, it doesn't. As a matter of fact, in biblical times, the wealth was looked at, especially in a righteous person, as being a blessing from God. And wealth today could be a blessing from God if it's in the right priority, in the right place. So what does it mean for us? It means that our priorities, the most important things in our life, should not be on amassing wealth here on this earth. If wealth becomes our goal, if that's what we're going for, if that's what we're looking for, if that's what we're seeking, we're looking at the wrong things. If wealth and amassing wealth and getting money or getting possessions becomes more important in our life than serving God, then that becomes our God. That becomes our idol that we put in God's place. If we do not use those possessions that God gives us, whether it's time, our talents, our treasures, anything that we have, any other resources that we might have, if we do not use that properly, use it for serving God, use it for doing God's will, use it for following after Him. If we do not use it for that, then we're putting it in the wrong place. If I was to win the Publishers Clearinghouse Sweepstakes, and some of you might be saying, or the lottery. No, I don't play the lottery. I don't do that. I would say that, but I do not play the lottery. I do not waste my money on those lottery tickets. I agree with what I heard a radio personality many years ago say. I mean, many years ago say about the lottery. He called it a tax on the foolish. I would call it a tax on the foolish or the poor, because those are the people that pay it, that play it the most and do that. There's a show that I've been seeing recently on television about people who have won the lottery, and they're taking the wealth that they got and buying a house. And this guy goes in and helps them find a home that just meets their needs and does what they want it to. Well, I have to laugh sometimes. I saw one the other day where this couple wanted a $350,000, $400,000 home, $500,000. I don't remember what it was, but it was up there. Wanted a home in that price range. And he asked them at the beginning, he said, how much did you win? They won $100,000. You think, well, that's just a drop in the bucket. And it is. It doesn't pay for the house. And winning $100,000 doesn't mean they got $100,000, because you got taxes you got to pay out of there. The government takes its chunk out, and believe me, it's a pretty good chunk that the government would take out of it. So I don't play the lottery. They say that your chances of winning the lottery are 7 times worse than that of being struck and killed by lightning. I don't play with lightning either, so I'm not going to play with that. But what do we use our possessions for? How are we going to do that? And I've thought about this, and I've thought about what would I do if I came into a sudden windfall of money, whether it's from Publishers Clearinghouse Sweepstakes or what. What would I do with all of that money? And the first thing I would do, this is after the government takes their chunk, because they always take theirs first. First thing I would do would be tithe. Give at least 10% to the work of the Lord. To me, that would be a priority. And then I would do something else to help my family, or maybe some friends out, some people that I know are in need, that not the people that come begging to you. I've been told that once a person gets a great sum of money like that, people come out of the woodwork. Someone made the joke, they said, if you want to find out your genealogy and who all's related to you, just tell everybody you came into $1 million. They'll come out of the woodwork looking for you. That may be true. But what would you do? What we do would do what we say we would do, and what we really do might be two different things. And let me tell you why I say that, because even though I don't have a bunch of money, I've not come into a great sum of money, I think it's important to give at least 10% of what we have to the Lord. And I do that. It's important that we do that. That's a part of our budget as a family. And my wife takes care of that part of it. So, but we depend on that. We give to the Lord. I found that you can't outgive God. I had a person tell me a few years back about a family member of theirs. And this particular family member was fairly wealthy, and he was busy in giving away his money to the work of the Lord. he told them, he said, it seems like the more I give away, the more God gives me to give away. You know, that may or may not be true for everybody, but I do know that God blesses people who give. What do? Don't put it in things here on this earth, because it's not going to last. It's not going to last. What's wrong with putting it away with things here on earth? What's wrong with going after wealth here on this earth? Well, there's several problems with making amassing wealth a problem here on this earth, a priority. First of all, the things on this earth have a tendency, as Jesus said here, to decay. They rust. They mold. They rot. They fall apart. People build houses. I know that there's some people that build great buildings and put their name on the front of it, and after a while that name comes down. It doesn't stay there. People build monuments to themselves, and a few years later they fall down. I've seen a lot of articles on the internet, and it fascinates me to see these, but articles on the internet of people's homes that they have built, and the opulence and the beauty and the splendor and the glamour of it all. And then something happens and it all falls apart. It goes to decay. That's a part of the law of nature. Things have a tendency to decay and rot. I've seen homes falling down that were once multi-million-dollar homes. Beautiful homes. No expense spared in the building of these homes, and yet they're not fit to inhabit now because they've decayed and rotted. Not fit for anything. Some of them even have nothing but animals living in them. We're constantly here. Second thing about it that's problem is, as Jesus said here, is thieves can steal it. We're constantly hearing about some people losing all of their money, their retirement, their wealth, whatever they have, through some scam that comes along. You say, well, I wouldn't fall for that. Well, don't say that, because as sure as you say that, that opens you up to be a victim. But we hear of that. We hear of people falling for schemes and investing in things that go bust. We hear about the electronic currencies like Bitcoin and others, and there are a bunch of them out there. And we hear about people that get great wealth through them, and then all of a sudden they lose it all. We hear about people investing in stocks and losing everything when it goes broke. We hear about thieves breaking in and robbing and stealing information and stealing identities and stealing things and using that to bankrupt people. It's all around, folks. You hear it everywhere. You hear all kinds of different things like that. And then a third problem is when this life is over, you can't take it with you. You can't take it with you. You don't see hearses pulling U-Haul trailers around. I know the ancient Egyptians in the pyramids thought that they should bury the person's wealth with them, and that wealth is still there if it hasn't been stolen by thieves over the years. They didn't get to take it with them to the afterlife. I've heard jokes, many jokes, you have too, about people dying and wanting to take their money with them. And the story's told about one man that was so caught up in money and the need for money, and he told his wife, he said, whatever you do when you bury me, if I go first, I want you to bury my money with me. And she was really concerned about it, but he made her promise, and so she promised. After he died, they were at the funeral. At the funeral, one of her friends asked her, said, "You didn't really bury his money with him, did you?" She said, "I sure did." She said, "You're kidding." She said, "No." She said, "I wrote him a check." He said, "I figure if he cashes it, he deserves it. But in the meantime, I'll keep using it." Well, there are all kinds of jokes like that out there. You can't take it with you. And you're going to leave it behind. And when you leave it behind, what's going to happen? Well, first of all, the government's going to get a lot of it. The government, the way taxes are, and I know it varies from state to state, but the way taxes are today, the government's going to get a huge chunk of it. I remember several years ago, the Rams used to be my football team. When they were in St. Louis, I loved them. I loved watching them. I loved to watch their games and cheer for them. And then the owner died. And when she died, her children could not afford to keep the team because the taxes. They had to sell the team to pay the taxes on what they had inherited. And of course, the sad part of that's the guy that bought the team was a trader to the area, and he took them and left and went back to Los Angeles with them and dissed the whole state of Missouri while he was at it, but that's another story. We're not going to get into that right now. But no matter how much you've got, no matter how much you've amassed on this earth, in the light of eternity, it is not going to do you any good whatsoever. Doesn't do you any good. Well, let's go on. In verse 20, we're told that we need to lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. You stop and think about it, there are no thieves in heaven. The Bible says they won't get in. God won't let them in. There are no forces there to steal your money. Can't break into heaven either. No matter how much you might want to try, you can't break into heaven. There are no corrupting influences there. There are no moths to eat. There are no worms to sneak in and destroy it. There are no rust or corroding factors in heaven. No corrupting influences are there. So how do you lay up treasures in heaven? Well, first of all, you don't do it by laying up treasures on earth. You lay up treasures in heaven by first of all obeying God. Doing what God, putting God first in your life. By serving others. Helping others who are in need. Helping others to do what needs to be done. Serving other people. You lay up treasures in heaven. Giving to the Lord's work. Giving to the Lord's work. Helping those in need. Helping God's work to go forward. We're taking up an offering this Sunday, I should say, for World Missions Outreach. When you give, you're laying up treasures in heaven. When you give your tithes and offerings to your church, you're laying up treasures in heaven. When you give in various ways, your time, your talents, your abilities, your treasures, whatever they might be to God, you're laying up treasures in heaven. Prayer, praying for others, doing things for others, living a righteous life. All of these things go together and help you to lay up your treasures in heaven. Let's go on. Verse 21. Now verse 21, I believe, is the key for the whole thing. It's a real key for these verses. And Jesus here tells us, he said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's the whole key to the whole thing. Where our treasure is, what we put our priorities behind, what is the most important thing in our life, that is where our heart's going to be. That's the real problem of going after and trying to amass great wealth here on earth, because that becomes what our heart desires the most. What we treasure the most. And it might be something that's not a sin in itself. But if we place that ahead of God, it could be something as God ordained as the family. If we put anything like that ahead of serving God, of living for God, then we're asking for trouble. We're asking for problems. If serving God is not the most important thing in your life, what is? Because see, that's where your treasure is. That's where your treasure is. What are your priorities in life? What's the most important thing for you? Is it serving God, living for God? Is it making money? Is it a job? Is it physical activities or health? Or what is it? And there's nothing wrong with having good health, and there's nothing wrong with doing physical things. There's nothing wrong with having wealth if you keep it in the right priority. Use it for the glory of God. Where is your treasure? Is your treasure being laid up in heaven? Are you sending it forth and sending it on ahead? Or what's your priority? What are your priorities? What are the most important things? Is having fun most important in your life? What is the most important thing in your life? Is it earthly treasures, or is it heavenly treasures? I hope that you're laying up treasures in heaven, because I hope that the most important things in your life are the things of God. Are they? Jesus said they need to be. If they're not, examine your life and change your priorities. Make serving God the most important thing, the most important priority. Number one in your life. And if you do that, you'll be laying up treasures in heaven, and God will bless you. Thank you for joining us tonight. I apologize for the beginning and the stumbling and the problems that we had here at the beginning. Hopefully you've listened to the rest of it and things have gone good for you. May God bless you. Join us Friday, our weekend Bible study. Join us in person Sunday. Look forward to seeing you. Have a good evening.